Now, helping the maritime industry eliminate GHG emissions by shaping standards and deploying solutions is Lynn Loo. She is CEO of the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonisation, a Singapore-based non-profit. Lynn, good to have you with us. In your recent survey that you did, the Global Maritime Decarbonisation Survey, what were some of the insights learned or gleaned from the maritime industry?
Roland, thanks for having me here. So this survey we did with BCG, so it's a GCMD BCG joint survey, and we surveyed 128 ship owners and ship operators. And shipping is a very heterogeneous industry, and so we made sure that we surveyed owners and operators of different fleet segments, different fleet sizes, geographies, to make sure that we have a comprehensive understanding of the state of decarbonization. And I think what we learned is that different companies are at different stages of decarbonization, of their decarbonization journey. There are some that have just started on their decarbonization journey, and then there are others that are further along. And that's why we use these archetypes. We call them front runners, we call them followers, and we call them conservatives. And we find that these different archetypes would need different solutions or different interventions in order to accelerate decarbonization of shipping.
Okay. And you're pushing for green corridor hubs to take place. How's that different from clean energy marine hubs?
Yeah, sure. So let's go back and talk a little bit about green corridors. And I think the idea of these green corridors is that, you have ships that can sail between two ports, and ideally it's a zero emission or a very low carbon point to point, basically. And so these green corridors can only happen if you have the infrastructure and the solutions at these ports to support the green corridors. And that's where I think the clean energy marine hub idea comes in. Shipping, in order for shipping to get to net zero emissions, we need the zero carbon fuels. Where are fuels going to come from? They're going to come from the land side. And that's why this clean energy marine hub idea is important. I think in order for shipping to decarbonize, not only do we need to think about the fuels that we use, we need to think about the stuff that we carry in our ships. Shipping today transports more than 90% of goods globally. More than 50% of that is energy, so in the form of oil and gas. In the future, by 2050, IRENA, this International Renewable Energy Organization, has predicted and projected that by 2050, more than 50% of the new fuels, so whether it's ammonia or hydrogen or methanol, that needs to be transported is going to be carried by ships. So shipping plays a really critical role. And so this clean energy marine hub idea is, for one, to bring the energy producers and the fuel producers close to the port, because then you have access to ships that can transport these molecules from where it's produced to where it's needed. And alongside, shipping then can access a little bit of it so that it can decarbonize its own journey as well. So that's sort of the idea, that you connect ports, networks of ports together so that you can accelerate shipping's decarbonization.
This fuel transition for maritime industry, there's no one fuel that's going to dominate, you think?
No, not at all. And I think we need to start now. And I think when we think about 2050 and beyond, the zero carbon fuels that people typically talk about are, green ammonia or e-methanol. E-methanol still has a carbon, so one needs to source that carbon sustainably. But equally important is to think about what we can do now, because the more we can reduce emissions now, that means the job becomes a little easier in the future. Yeah. And so what is available now? Well, the fuels that are available now, they're not perfect either. So there are sustainable biofuels. That's limited in scale and quantity. People have talked about liquefied natural gas as part of the solution. There, the challenge is methane slip. Methane is an even more warming greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so we need to prevent leakage of methane. And then, of course, it's energy efficiency measures. And in fact, we've seen numbers where to get to 2030 interim targets, 80% of the emissions reduction needs to come from us being more efficient in how we use energy. So these are the kinds of things we should start doing now, because that reduces the emissions and that makes the job a little easier for us going forward.
Okay. You've spoken about this, but where else are the operational gaps and the capacity issues when it comes to greening the supply chain for fuel, maritime fuel?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of fuel you're talking about. So let's start with ammonia first, and then we can talk about the other ones. So green ammonia isn't available today. Ammonia is being produced at about 200 million tons a year, mostly for chemical use, chemical feedstock, fertilizer, and only about 20 million tons are being transported around on ships. Okay? So in order to use it as a marine fuel, we need to have the supply, the green ammonia supply, or even blue ammonia. We need supply. We need infrastructure. We need bunkering facilities, storage facilities at the port site to support this. More importantly, we need guidelines. We need to think about its safety, because ammonia is a toxic compound, and so safety is paramount. So figuring out that safety is really, really important, and that's where GCMD hopes to play a role. So we've commissioned a safety study, we've completed a safety study, looking at whether we can use ammonia as a marine fuel, whether you can transport ammonia around safely. That study is done, and so we're doing a couple things with that study. One is we've submitted it to Singapore Maritime Academy. It's been incorporated into this IGF code training program so that seafarers and operators can be trained to use ammonia. The other is we're going to submit to Standards Development Organization to help develop guidelines. And then we're using this as a basis to come up with pilots to demonstrate that you can transfer ammonia safely within port limits. The idea is to get the ecosystem ready, familiar, confident enough to be able to do this before the ships become available, before green ammonia becomes available.
Okay. So this ammonia bunkering study that you've conducted, as it stands right now, are we close to, say, a test pilot program?
So I want to make sure we all understand here. So bunkering, it means transferring the fuel into a fuel tank. That can't be done yet because ammonia propulsion ships are not available today, okay? So what we can do in the pilot is to mimic the bunkering conditions, to try a couple things like transferring ammonia from a cargo tank to a cargo tank, but within port limits, so you're exposed to the similar kind of risk portfolio, so we can iron out the details. We can get the ecosystem comfortable with this idea that ammonia can be transferred safely, so that when ships become available, you can actually do the bunkering pilot.
Okay,
so lots to do.
Okay, and thank you very much. We've run out of time. Thank you for educating us on the Green Corridor, and that was Lynn Loo from the Center for Maritime Decarbonisation.